When Marlene Dietrich stepped onto the set of Morocco in 1930, she wasn't just making a movie. She was staging a revolution in menswear. The German-born actress had already shocked Berlin audiences with her cabaret performances, but Hollywood presented a different battlefield entirely. Here, the newly adopted Hays Code was beginning to tighten its grip on what audiences could see, though strict enforcement wouldn't arrive until 1934. Dietrich's penchant for blurring gender lines through fashion made studio executives break into cold sweats. Her strategy was brilliantly subversive. Rather than openly challenging Hollywood's moral guardians, Dietrich weaponized elegance itself. Those tailored tuxedos and sharp-shouldered suits weren't just costume choices. They were calculated acts of defiance wrapped in such undeniable sophistication that critics struggled to condemn them outright. When she kissed a woman on the lips in Morocco while dressed in full masculine evening wear, audiences gasped. Not just at the kiss, but at how natural she looked commanding the screen in men's clothing. The actress understood something her contemporaries missed. Androgyny could be a form of armor. By crafting an image that existed somewhere between traditional gender expectations, she created space for herself that the rigid studio system couldn't easily categorize or control. It was widely rumored that her relationships with women, like poet Mercedes de Acosta, became Hollywood's worst-kept secret, yet her carefully constructed public persona made her untouchable. Dietrich's genius lay in making her rebellion look effortless. She transformed what could have been career-ending scandal into her signature style, proving that sometimes the most radical act is simply refusing to choose sides. Tallulah Bankhead treated discretion like a foreign language she refused to learn. While her contemporaries whispered behind closed doors and crafted elaborate cover stories, the Alabama-born actress made her bisexuality part of her public persona with the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather. Her approach was so brazen that it left Hollywood's moral guardians scrambling for a response that wouldn't make them look prudish. Bankhead's candor became legendary through her razor-sharp one-liners. When asked about her romantic preferences, she reportedly quipped that she was ambisextrous, delivering the line with such theatrical flair that audiences weren't sure whether to gasp or applaud. She openly discussed affairs with both male and female lovers at dinner parties, treating her sexuality as just another fascinating aspect of her larger-than-life personality. This wasn't coded language or subtle innuendo. It was full-throated honesty in an era that demanded silence. Many observers noted that the backlash was swift and merciless. She faced criticism from conservative and religious circles with some calls for boycotts and public denunciations. Hollywood executives, already nervous about the Hays Code's tightening grip, began viewing Bankhead as a liability rather than an asset. Studio heads whispered that her openness made her unmarketable to mainstream audiences, effectively limiting her to stage work, where she could control her own narrative. Yet Bankhead's refusal to apologize or retreat created something unexpected, a blueprint for authentic self-expression that would inspire generations of performers. Her legacy became a rallying cry for those who believed that living truthfully was preferable to a lifetime of carefully constructed lies. Universal Studios treated Rock Hudson's private life like a military operation, complete with strategic maneuvers and emergency protocols. The studio's publicity machine didn't just manage his image, it manufactured an entirely fictional version of his romantic history. When gossip columnist Hedda Hopper began sniffing around Hudson's bachelor lifestyle in 1954, Universal's response was swift and calculated. The orchestrated romance with Secretary Phyllis Gates wasn't just a casual arrangement, it was a full-scale production. Studio executives handpicked Gates specifically because she worked within their system and understood the rules of the game. The 1955 wedding became Hollywood's most cynical performance, complete with staged honeymoon photos and carefully planted magazine interviews about their whirlwind courtship. According to some accounts, Hudson reportedly felt trapped in what he privately called his prison sentence. Universal's damage control extended far beyond fake marriages. The studio maintained a network of friendly journalists who would kill unfavorable stories before they reached print. When tabloids threatened to expose Hudson's relationships with men, studio fixers would arrive with briefcases full of cash, or threats of lost access to other major stars. They even arranged elaborate double dates with female co-stars, ensuring photographers captured Hudson looking appropriately heterosexual at premieres and nightclubs. The psychological toll was devastating. Hudson lived in constant fear that a single photograph or overheard conversation could destroy everything he'd built. When AIDS finally forced his hand in 1985, his public acknowledgement revealed the crushing weight of 3 decades spent hiding in plain sight. Many argue that Ramon Novarro's rise to stardom came with pressures that would ultimately contribute to the circumstances leading to his tragic death. The Mexican-born actor became MGM's answer to Rudolph Valentino in the 1920s, captivating audience as the smoldering romantic lead in Ben-Hur and The Student Prince. Behind the carefully crafted image of Latin lover, however, lay a secret that studio executives treated like radioactive material. Novarro was gay, and it's widely believed that many in power were aware of his sexuality. MGM's protective machinery worked overtime to shield their investment. The studio arranged strategic relationships with female co-stars, planted stories about romantic dinners, and reportedly even orchestrated a supposed engagement that mysteriously dissolved before reaching the altar. Publicists crafted an elaborate mythology around Novarro's bachelor status, painting him as a devoted son too focused on caring for his aging mother to settle down. Blackmailers circled like vultures throughout Novarro's career. Tabloid photographers were known to target stars like Novarro, hoping to capture compromising images. Former lovers and acquaintances regularly approached him with demands for money in exchange for silence. Each threat contributed to ongoing anxiety, transforming what should have been the golden years of his career into a perpetual state of fear. The tragic irony came decades later. On October 31st, 1968, when 2 young men murdered Novarro in his own home during a targeted attack. The press coverage was merciless, finally exposing the very secrets he'd spent a lifetime protecting. Headlines screamed about his homosexuality with the same sensational glee that had once celebrated his romantic screen roles. Alla Nazimova's Beverly Hills mansion became more than just a residence. It transformed into a clandestine headquarters where Hollywood's most vulnerable performers could finally exhale without fear of exposure or professional annihilation. The Garden of Alla, as insiders called her sprawling estate, operated as a sophisticated network of protection during the 1930s and 40s, when even the slightest hint of same-sex attraction could trigger industry blacklisting. Nazimova, the Russian-born silent film icon, understood survival better than most, having navigated her own romantic relationships with women while maintaining her status as one of cinema's most celebrated actresses. Some historians believe the term sewing circle emerged from Nazimova's gatherings as ingenious camouflage for what was actually happening behind her mansion's gates. When actresses mentioned attending a sewing circle, industry insiders understood the real meaning: a safe space where lesbian and bisexual women could socialize without the constant performance of heterosexual respectability. Her relationship with theater legend Eva Le Gallienne exemplified the delicate balance these women maintained between public discretion and private authenticity. Their romance flourished within industry circles, where their connection was acknowledged but never discussed openly. According to some biographers, Le Gallienne's letters suggest she found refuge in Nazimova's world, where the exhausting mask of conventional femininity could finally slip away. Beyond her own romantic life, Nazimova functioned as a protective matriarch for countless performers who faced discrimination and potential ruin. The Garden of Alla represented something revolutionary for its time, a place where queer identity wasn't just tolerated, but celebrated as part of the artistic spirit that made Hollywood's golden age possible. Anthony Perkins discovered that becoming Norman Bates meant more than just landing the role of a lifetime. It meant inheriting a psychological prison that would shadow every aspect of his existence, both professional and personal. The 1960s psycho performance that made him a household name also typecast him as Hollywood's go-to disturbed character, creating an eerie parallel between his on-screen personas and his off-screen struggles with identity. Studios capitalized on his unsettling screen presence, repeatedly casting him in roles that emphasized psychological instability, while simultaneously demanding he project heterosexual normalcy in his public life. The pressure to maintain a straight image became suffocating for Perkins, who found himself caught between his authentic attractions to men and the industry's relentless expectations. Studio executives orchestrated highly publicized dates with starlets, manufacturing romantic storylines that tabloids eagerly consumed while Perkins quietly endured the charade. Desperate to align his reality with Hollywood's demands, Perkins underwent conversion therapy, a brutal practice that promised to cure his homosexuality through psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. The treatment reflected the era's deeply harmful belief that same-sex attraction was a mental illness that could be corrected through willpower and professional intervention. Perkins eventually married photographer Barry Berenson in 1973, a union that produced 2 sons and provided the heterosexual credentials his career demanded. Some viewed this marriage as genuine love, while others interpreted it as his final attempt to escape the psychological maze that had trapped him since his psycho breakthrough. His death from AIDS-related complications in 1992 brought his private struggles into tragic focus. Mercedes de Acosta's 1960 memoir, Here Lies the Heart, exploded Hollywood's carefully guarded secrets, naming names and hinting at romantic entanglements with some of the industry's most untouchable stars. The playwright and poet, who had spent decades in elite circles, described passionate connections with Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, and Isadora Duncan, relationships that went far beyond friendship. Her coded confessions transformed her from insider to pariah overnight, as Hollywood closed ranks against someone who dared break its code of silence. Her memoir was both bold and strategic, using suggestive language to reveal intimacy while maintaining plausible deniability. Sophisticated readers could easily decode her portraits of love and emotional intensity. Biographers note that Garbo felt so betrayed by the revelation she cut off all contact, while other former lovers distanced themselves to protect their public images. The backlash was swift and harsh. Studios blacklisted Mercedes, former friends ignored her, and social invitations vanished. Once a fixture in Hollywood's most exclusive circles, she found herself financially struggling and socially isolated, paying dearly for refusing to keep the industry's secrets. Despite the fallout, she never expressed regret, insisting that authentic love deserved acknowledgement, not shame. Her memoir stands as one of the earliest attempts by a Hollywood insider to challenge the industry's enforced heterosexual facade, making her both a cautionary tale and an unlikely pioneer of queer visibility, decades before such honesty became culturally acceptable. Hollywood historians note that George Nader's refusal to become an industry informant marked one of the most principled stands against the blackmail machinery that terrorized gay performers in the 1950s. When tabloid journalists and studio executives pressured the rising Universal Pictures star to name other homosexual actors in exchange for silence about his own sexuality, Nader reportedly laughed and refused to play their destructive game. In an era where compliance meant survival and resistance meant professional ruin, his defiance was remarkable. Universal had invested heavily in Nader's matinee idol image, with his looks often compared to Rock Hudson. His natural screen presence had already attracted significant attention, making his sudden fall from grace especially notable. Studio executives quietly ended his contract, following the industry's practice of distancing themselves from actors who wouldn't cooperate with damage control. The aftermath showed how thoroughly Hollywood could erase those who challenged its authority. Major productions became off-limits to Nader almost overnight, and he was treated as a liability. Some believe his principled stance inspired others to resist similar coercion, though most chose compliance to protect their careers. Nader's later European film career revealed what Hollywood lost by enforcing heterosexual conformity. Working in Germany and Spain, he found creative freedom and personal authenticity that had been impossible under the American studio system. His long-term partnership with Mark Miller was more openly acknowledged, a stark contrast to the secrecy of his Hollywood years. Nader's post-Hollywood success highlighted the artistic potential American studios sacrificed in their pursuit of moral respectability. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.